All right. Today is March 12, 2018. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes CSI implementation group. First up, we're going to review any PRs that need attention. First, we have Liveness Probe with host path plugin by Sergey. Sergey, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So basically, this is an example where Liveness plugin is integrated with the host path. So what it does, it's the binary, and the source code is in the same repo, which constantly sends. Well, okay. So the binary just send a single node probe, but since it's integrated with the liveness probe of the Kubernetes, then the Kubernetes calls for it like every other time, which is defined in the interval, and then analyzes what it returns. If it returns 0, everything is fine. If it returns 1, then it retries multiple times, and once the number of times exceeded, it restarts the pod.
Nice.
So, and my kind of a recommendation is like in future to use it for pretty much every plugin, because I think it would be a good kind of
So I have a question. I haven't looked at this, but it's interesting, and I was wondering how this works. Do you point it to where you point it? What path is it checking?
As you can see, there's a parameter CSI address. So I point to the socket,
right,
in the configuration, and that's pretty much it.
Oh, so it's using Unix domain socket to check the probe?
Correct. Yeah, it runs in the same container as the plugin.
Right.
So they share everything.
Okay. Now, is it an HTTP? It's an HTTP probe, right? Or is it?
No, it's the gRPC.
So it does have a gRPC probe. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because
no, hang on. The gRPC probe is implemented by the binary, which is plugged in the spec.
Right.
Okay.
And the probe is probing that endpoint and calling the gRPC an actual method, or is this just HTTP okay and it's good?
No.
I'm just curious. I haven't
Okay.
checked.
Saad, could you scroll, please, back to the place where we see the liveness?
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, in the spec.
And the reason why I'm asking is when I looked at this earlier, it didn't. I didn't know if it was going to work with a gRPC endpoint. That was one of my questions.
All right. So as you can see, so we are using Liveness Probe, which is a element of the Kubernetes.
Correct.
But then there's a command. It calls Liveness Probe binary file. That's the program which I put together, and that program calls the gRPC probe of the CSI, and it points to the socket.
So you created an adapter that's calling the gRPC in the back end.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, and then basically, if it fails, it returns to the Kubernetes Liveness Probe response. Yes, it's failed, and then it goes to the retry mechanism.
Yeah. Okay.
Does the Liveness Probe need to be? Oh, sorry. I was going to ask if it needs to be privileged mode, but it's a SIG container, so it's fine.
One question about this is: is the Liveness Probe a standalone container, or are you bundling the Liveness Probe binary in another container?
It has to be bundled with the plugin image.
Does it have to be bundled with a plugin image? Could you have it as a standalone container that shares a socket? This is with the empty or just shares a socket?
I would say actually, customers are not liking seeing multiple containers for things. I would suggest maybe having it included. Can we have like a CSI Cinder container, like driver registrar, and this become one.
Yeah, you could bundle into CSI sidecar.
The other recommendation, or I'm just throwing it out, the little bit I read about liveness probing is just an HTTP. It's just checks for HTTP OK. So if you were to point it at a CSI endpoint and it actually, and it actually returns HTTP OK, I'm wondering if that would work. I don't know. Did you check that, Sergey?
Well, I think it won't work because basically we are not providing any HTTP like endpoints.
I think gRPC is HTTP2, right? So it's binary only.
Yeah, gRPC is HTTP. We're just using Unix domain socket as a transport.
Oh no, I thought it was HTTP2.
Oh,
all right.
Yes, it is.
So we won't be able to pull it. Easily. At least I've never seen that.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was a way around having the additional, but it seems like having the adapter binary works.
We should definitely check it out, though. I think it's a good idea if it does work.
Yeah.
I think if it doesn't work, then we'll fall back to what Sergey has.
But that leaves an opportunity to bring that up to the folks responsible for that liveliness. Maybe we should include gRPC as an endpoint type.
Yeah, there was a discussion in the past, but basically it just died. It never came to any results or any code commits.
Okay, just curious. Thanks.
Also, what does Liveness Probe do? Does it actually execute a gRPC call?
Yeah, that's correct. It calls it calls probe CSI call, and it waits for a return from the plugin. Plugin returns, it exits with the code 0.
Okay, see, that will not be able to be done by the Kubernetes HTTP Liveness Probe. You need a program for that.
Well, no, just the pure Liveness Probe is just an HTTP end check. That's all it does.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We would have to create an implementation that when that gets received, it does a node probe call to the CSI.
Right. Well, yeah. Let's just look, because I don't know if if you point a regulation, if it just cares about 200 OK returning, that could work. But if it does anything else, then obviously it wouldn't work.
One of the advantages I see in this approach is because, well, when you request just the HTTP, then basically it's gRPC server portion replies you. In my case, it's the plugin needs to send the reply back to the Liveness Probe. So in this case, we're actually testing the plugin bits and not just the server gRPC library or whatever the modules are running on behalf of the plugin. So that's why.
Just so you know, Sergey, I've done it before, and you don't have to point it at the root of the server. You can point it at some / something, and some handler does that work. What I'm asking is that the handler, there needs to be a server with a handler to be able to return 200K. That's all, right? And maybe there's a handler that does that and executes no probe, or maybe gRPC can do that. What I'm saying is that we need to investigate.
One thing we need to keep in mind is security. So we can't expose the entire CSI endpoint, which is why we only expose it through Unix domain sockets. We need to keep that in mind.
No, yeah, that's right.
So I think this adapter basically is a nice way to be able to say, okay, we're just going to expose the bare minimum of the API that is required. That doesn't allow you access to do anything else.
Yep. Good point.
Overall, this looks great. Thanks, Sergey. I have to look over the code, but otherwise it looks good. If anybody else is interested, please review the code and give Sergey more feedback on that. Cool. Next up is a PR by Felipe, updating the Kubernetes 1.10 docs.
Yeah.
Felipe, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, sure. So it's still a lot under progress. I just posted some questions before I continue. So I don't know whether we should have keep info for 1.9 or leave the doc only for 1.10. What do you guys think?
Just 1.10 I think is fine for now. Actually, I don't know. What do you think, Luis?
I think what we can do is we can have a page for 1.9, push it out until the end of the document.
Okay.
And, because I think what happens is like things like OpenShift or other distributions of Kubernetes, they're lagging. So there will be times where documentation and be needed for those. But we'll push it down. We give a link to say 1.9, you can go over here, and 1.10 is the main chunk of the page.
Okay, yeah, because for example, the cluster setup for 1.9 is more complicated, right? You have to enable all these flags.
Yeah.
All right, makes sense. And then somewhat related, the mount propagation is also moving to beta with 1.10, right? So we don't need to enable it in the gate feature flag thing.
Correct.
Okay, great. And the last question then about the privileged flag. What's the status there? We still need it, right?
Yes, you still need the allow privilege flag. It is enabled by default in some configurations like GKE, GCE, but for default plain vanilla Kubernetes, it is not, and it needs to be explicitly enabled.
With kubeadm, it's set by default.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I'll just. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just a quick thing. If we are going to move to a CSI only model, and the CSI requires privilege mode, wouldn't it be then that the default would always be privileged? I think this is what we tried to talk about way back.
We had an item to investigate that this quarter. We didn't make any progress on it.
Yeah.
We can pick it up again next quarter and
All right, this is that.
fight the good fight.
All right. Yeah, I'll just add a remark that we need it. I think it makes sense.
Cool. Thanks, Felipe.
All right. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Next up is a set of bugs. So I was checking this out on Friday and over the weekend, and I discovered a couple of issues. One was the file system type was not being set in the external attacher. I opened up an issue for this, and Nick Wren quickly sent out a PR for it. And it looks like Jan's been able to get that merged. So that is resolved. We'll go ahead and mark that green. Next up, I had CSI node publish read only. I noticed that it wasn't being set correctly while I was writing the documentation on the Kubernetes side. And there was a couple of PRs that were sent out, one by, I believe this is Lynn, I forget, and Sergey. There were two different proposals for how we should set or where we should get the read-only value from. So I believe Lynn was suggesting pulling the value similar to the way that it is retrieved from the persistent volume spec, falling back to from the volume spec. I looked into this code, and I think two issues with it. One is I don't think this value is ever set. I think that's a bug with all the existing volume plugins. I haven't had a chance to actually run through with the debugger to verify this, but just based on my reading of the code, I don't think this value is ever set. I think the reason it hasn't been noticed is because in the end, we mount the container using the value is specified in the pod container mount option, read-only option, and that mounts it into the container as read-only. But I suspect that this value, which is used in the setup calls within the existing volume plugins, may be incorrect. So what I suggested was I think this value would be okay to use if it was setting the value correctly, but since it's not, I lean towards Sergey's fix, which is actually looking at the pod objects, the volumes in the pod object, and finding the associated volume and pulling the read-only value from that. It's a little bit complicated, but I think that might be more correct. Any thoughts on this?
Quick question. You're saying that read-only value is never read from the code perspective or from the whole, from the spec itself? Like,
so two problems. One was the bug is just saying that the value is never passed through to CSI on the node publish. We just never passed it through. The value was never set. I mean, we were passing it. I think there's a CSI volume manager that has the read-only value in there, but that was never set. So that was the bug. We need to set it to something. The question is, what should we set it to? And the answer to that is, if you start looking at the API, there's a bunch of places where we have read-only flags or read-only fields. And the question is, which one should we be setting? There is read-only flags inside the volume source. There's read-only fields in the container mount options. Sergey and I discussed this over the weekend, and I think we both agreed that for the node publish, the call that's responsible for mounting, we should pass in the pod mount read-only option. And that's what this PR is doing. If there's no objection to this, I'm going to go ahead and approve this after the meeting.
I have a my thought on this is that I see where you're going, and there are two places. There's the mount options, and there's I think the PVC you can set read only, right?
So actually, there's three. There's inside the PV object, inside the volume source. Then in the persistent volume claim volume source, you could specify another one. And then a third place is the mount option for the container inside the pod.
Yeah, see, to me,
I think if you're using storage class, you could specify it.
Right, you could specify the access mode on the PVC as well.
See, to me, I think we're trying to fix too much. My suggestion, do it like everybody else is doing right now, even though it doesn't work, but create a bug to try to fix this and everybody else's. Right?
I can buy that argument.
Because what happens is when we introduce this creates almost like a fork of an implementation. Yeah. It may not be the actual one, so it may have to go fix this and the others. Now we have to fix two things. Now, I'm not viewing this from an implementation from a correctness. I'm viewing this from a maintenance perspective. Yeah, so that's my only suggestion.
And I would also throw that I have seen other plugins, built-in plugins that instead of reading a Boolean where you would, like you say, you don't know what to default to, they use a pointer to a Boolean, and if it's never specified, they detect a nil, and then they try to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, I think the default value versus specified versus not specified isn't the issue.
Okay.
The issue is just, one, there's three different sources of truth. Like, do we use the value that's specified inside the volume source, this value specified inside the PVC volume source, or the value specified for the pod mount read-only? I believe the third one is the correct one. But even beyond which one of those three to use, the fact is that this value, which a lot of the other volume plugins are using, is just never set.
Right.
So that's incorrect. I like Luis's argument of let's be consistent with the other volume plugins and open up an issue to fix all of them instead of having a one-off fix here and then fixing it and having to undo it. That's a valid argument. Sergey, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
And the issue can point to Sergey's fix as here's an example implementation. Yeah.
And plus, that fix can be picked up with other external drivers as they come. Well,
okay.
Actually, it would be just for this would just be for the CSI one.
Yeah. What this effectively means is that we would accept ML MHL's PR, but it would not fix the issue until the root cause, which is spec.readonly is incorrect, gets fixed. Arguably, we could just go and fix that right now if anyone is interested, or we could punt on it. Sergey, since you're working on this, do you have an interest on picking this up and basically expanding this PR to basically make sure that spec.readonly is set correctly and it's way back in Volume Manager? Otherwise, we could.
Yeah, I could work on it, but I mean, I'm not sure if it's gonna make into the deadline.
Yeah, we have I think code freeze being lifted in 2 days. So yeah, I can buy that argument. In that case, we could revive this PR and then open up another issue to fix it, or just use the original issue to track it longer term after 1.10.
Yeah, sounds good. Just if we could make sure, like, if you merge other fix, so it might close your issue. So somehow we need to keep it open.
Yeah,
for
we can do that manually. Okay, I think we'll do that. I'll merge this one then, and then I'll reopen. He already closed this PR. And he's probably in China, so I'm not sure he'll be available. Sergey, do you mind reopening or just creating a new PR with this fix?
Yeah, we should be quite political about it. So I know that we went back and we liked it. We've seen it now.
Actually, I think I might have permission to reopen. Oh, there we go.
Hey.
Okay. All right, cool. So I'll take a look at that offline then. Let's keep that as orange. And then finally, the third issue is one that was raised by Jan. And Jan, do you want to discuss this one? CSI Volume plugin provisioner and attacher should not ignore missing secrets.
Yeah, I went through the code and I noticed that if there is a secret referenced in storage class and the provisioner is unable to load it, then it discards the error, just logs it, and then continues with CSI call with no secret. And in my opinion, this is wrong. The secret is optional in CSI, but once the Kubernetes admin configures it, then we should obey the admin and use the secret, or tell the admin that something is wrong, and not just use empty secret. And the same happens in attacher. I didn't check the volume plugin itself.
So what that would allow us to do is basically fast failure.
Yes.
If
I have a typo in my storage class, then I will get error very quickly instead of going through all the logs and discovering what's wrong and where.
I think Sergey and I discussed this before, and we decided not to do that because the thought was that the provisioner and attacher wouldn't necessarily know what the correct behavior for a given plugin is. But I think what you're arguing is that the cluster administrator seems to think that this is the correct behavior, and if they specify it and we can't fetch it, then just fail it because this is what the cluster administrator wants, whether the plugin expects it or not. I can buy that argument. I would be okay with making those changes.
Okay, I will send PR soon.
Okay.
In this case, the similar behavior needs to be changed on the Kubernetes side because we do exactly the same thing.
Okay. It's not a blocking issue, it can wait.
Okay.
After 1.10.
Sergey, can you open an issue on the Kubernetes side to track it and add it to this section?
Yeah, I could do it, I guess.
Or I'll do it offline if you're busy. No problem.
No, it's not. No. I mean, I thought Jan might want to keep an eye on both of them since they are very related. But I could do it definitely. It's not a
Okay.
matter.
Up to you guys. You guys can work it offline.
I can open them tomorrow when I go to work.
Okay. All right. So we'll let Jan do it then. Seems reasonable. Thanks for raising that. We'll go ahead.
I have a question on this secrets. This is the controller create secrets, right? It's this the when you create a volume, that's the parameter you pass in.
Yes.
Okay. I have a question on that because I have a similar parameter in create snapshot, and someone was asking, basically, can these secrets be updated when the plugin is running, or should the plugin be stopped and then restarted with an updated secret?
Generally, these values should be treated as immutable once they're created, but the Kubernetes API doesn't enforce that. So it is possible that a value is used, for example, on create volume, and then the secret itself gets updated. The way that it works today is that it's like a point in time. When create volume happens, the value is used. If it changes after that, there is no automatic behavior that happens. If a user tries to create a new volume, then the new value is used. I believe the same thing should apply for snapshots.
Okay. But it cannot be, let's say if it's in the middle of updating, it should not be changed, right? Let's say when the plugin is running, it's not going to take any value. You have to stop the plugin to take in a new value, I believe.
For create volume?
Or create volume or create snapshot, you have to stop the plugin?
No, I mean, as far as the plugin is concerned, it's just a parameter that's being passed in on a call.
Okay. So it does not have to be stopped. Okay.
It doesn't have to be stopped. The only place that the plugin would need to be stopped and restarted is if the any parameters that were passed in for initializing the plugin change. So you could imagine that somebody used I don't know. Yeah, even in that case, you could probably do like a secret volume mount, and it would not necessarily require it to be restarted. But anyway, we're getting off track there. Does that answer your question?
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Next up, a question by Jan. Provisioner and attacher use storage KDS V1 Beta 1 instead of V1 Alpha 1 because the V1 Beta 1 is enabled by default and users don't need to enable it. Answer to this is absolutely yes. I thought we already made this change. Is that not the case?
No. At least not in the images on Quay.
I see. Oh, I think the images on Quay might be out of date.
Okay, I didn't check that.
I think if we look at...
the images on Quay are normally Canary ones on the latest, so we need to just retag it, push it.
Okay, I will check where's the problem and fix
Try
it.
the Canary ones. If the Canary ones don't work, then we
Okay, feel free to open up issues in all the repos if this is not the case. Okay, and your next issue is CSI persistent volume secret ref. Who do they authenticate and authorize? Kubernetes or end user? Who fills them in if it's not the external provisioner? This is a good question. It is something that Sergey and I talked about. For this release, a cluster administrator is responsible for setting those secrets. And in the future, what we would like is for CSI to automatically be able to specify the secrets. CSI, so Sergey, do you remember this conversation about exposing a way to be able to set parameters from the storage class by the end user?
Yeah, that's correct. And so basically, when I started working on the Ceph plugin, I end up in the situation where I couldn't understand how I can pass, let's say, a secret to the not volume publish call. And then I ping Saad, and so what I end up doing is that the only way user for now can communicate the secret to use is via the storage class, because that's the only place where user has a field to specify the secret name. So that's the secret used in the storage class I use in the create volume. Right, and then when the provisioner create a volume, calls for create a volume to the plugin, then it uses the same secret and it assigns it to the PV. I forgot what was the not publish volume reference. So I kind of duplicated the secret which was in the storage class, and I use the same in PV when it gets created. So when the volume needs to be mounted, then instead of looking at the storage class, I take the secret from the PV and pass it to the not publish volume.
Yeah, and where do you store it, in attributes or in this?
Yeah, there are 3 attributes we added in the PV, and so I store it in the not publish volume secret. I might be wrong on the exact name, but in that attribute, one of those 3 attributes.
Okay. Because I checked the provisioner and it doesn't fill the secret refs, so it must be in attributes probably. No, it is
I'm
there.
positive it's there is a place, because I mean otherwise my Ceph wouldn't work.
I'm blind. It's a few lines below. Okay. It makes sense. But it's just not published secret, not the others.
Exactly, because I don't need them. So, and 2 others probably would use by some other plugins. So.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for clarification.
All right. Thank you for that. And finally, we are a little bit over time, but we can go over these tasks if there's an update on any of these. Do we have, so I reached out to Chakri about flex volume. He said he would have him or somebody from his team take a look at this. So hopefully he's back from vacation soon and can take a look at that. Did we get a resolution on who's owning the NFS volume, whether it's rootfs or Shing?
So I'm talking to rootfs now. So I was initially going to get going on my own setup, but I'm having some problems on my own setup now. So, but I will see if he want to take it over.
Okay.
I do have a update on the Cinder driver. Yesterday Friday we were talking about that. So I checked with them. Basically, right now, Dims, Dims, right? He right now have a temporary location for the Cinder plugin, but it will move to either a OpenStack repo or a repo under Kubernetes org. He said there are discussions going on with the OpenStack Foundation and also within SIG OpenStack. Should know the results in a few days.
Okay, so either be OpenStack or K8s, and SIG OpenStack is discussing. The only feedback I have there is between the two, OpenStack might be the better home for it because the driver itself should not be unique to Kubernetes. It'll apply to Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry, Docker, Swarm, Mesos.
Okay.
So OpenStack would make more sense if you have any influence on that.
Okay, I will let him know.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. So we'll mark that as work in progress. Mock driver.
Also, yeah, about the mock driver, Sergey mentioned it already does does it already is compliant with 0.2.
Okay.
There's only a few things missing. So there's this PR from Luis simplifying the codes, and also something about error codes. Maybe Sergey can say more.
Cool.
Yeah, actually, it's the same story we discussed before when we needed to make sure that mock driver returns the codes exactly as expected or specified by spec, and we have some sort of a working group now, Luis, David, and myself, so the discussing that part.
Actually, yeah, we'll be actually hopefully discussing this right after the meeting. Second thing is that we minimized all the code. Thank you for the reviews, and that got merged in. So now our mock driver is super simple. Just a few
Nice.
So.
Okay, that's awesome. And finally, VFS driver, Pietro, did you get a chance to start on this?
Yeah, he's not here. He asked me to, he asked who could give him some pointers on how to test this. With whom could he talk directly?
Let's see, who started the VFS driver?
What is the VFS driver?
It shows up in our documentation, Kubernetes-CSI.
Oh, that's the driver from the old defunct code group.
Ah, okay. So I guess we can, and it looks like
it's a
Andrew's
local
already.
It's a local only VFS driver.
Got it. And looks like Andrew's already merged the CSI 0.20 update for it. So, okay, looks like we don't need any update there.
Okay, so it's probably done already.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that brings me back to the discussion of what do we want to do with the drivers directory, drivers repos? Can we name that sample drivers and we pull out the real ones into real repos? Should we do that till next quarter?
Is Brad on this call today?
No.
Okay, let's save that discussion for when Brad's on the call. He has a lot of thoughts on this. In short, I think that seems like a good idea for next quarter.
That's fine with me.
Cool. So that concludes the driver updates. Next thing is finding a permanent home for NFS and Cinder. Brad's working on doing that for NFS. Xing is looking to talk to the OpenStack folks about Cinder, so hopefully we have that resolved soon. We still need a home for AWS EBS. Is anybody interested in hunting down some AWS folks to talk to? Otherwise, I could go to the AWS SIG and ask for an owner.
I can do that. I know the AWS guys.
Awesome.
SIG too. The concern I have is that they're just gonna put their hands up and say, I don't know. We may have to go to Amazon themselves and see, or either Amazon.
So I think SIG AWS's lead is the GM of Kubernetes at Amazon.
Is that new?
Bob,
I think Justin Barbara.
Yeah, I think it's now both Justin and Bob. I'm not certain.
Okay, then I'll get in contact with him.
Yeah, if you could get in touch with Bob, I think that might be the best way.
You got it.
All right, cool. LPBAON. Sorry if I slaughtered that. Feel free to fix it.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry. I'm just putting LP. Status, we'll talk to Bob. We'll talk to someone from AWS. Okay. Next up, before or around the time that 1.10 is released, we're going to need to go ahead and cut the external provisioner, external attacher, driver registrar for the 0.2 release. We can do that when we get there. One more item that is left for updating is plugin capabilities. So if external provisioner should check if plugin capabilities returns a controller capability. If it does not, then the external provisioner shouldn't even bother to try to call the create volume call because it doesn't exist, so that call should fail. And then for external attacher, it should end up being a no-op.
That sounds like an issue for me that we need to track.
We can track it as an issue or a task. I'm not sure.
I mean, either way, it's the same. I just need to track
Well, we
it.
need somebody to work on it. I messaged Nick Wren, who was asking for some work, to see if he's interested in it. Is anybody else here interested in working on it? Otherwise, hopefully Nick will pick it up.
Yeah, definitely. Giving more work to other. It's fine. I like it because it enhances the team. It makes it bigger.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So hopefully Nick is able to respond. He's in China, so I'll probably get a response from him tonight. Finally, documentation. I have a PR out for the Kubernetes entry documentation that has been LGTM'd by Sergey, and it's awaiting review by the docs owners. So we can mark that as orange. And it looks like Felipe is already this work is already underway, correct, Felipe?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, and Felipe, when the PRs are ready, just send me a Slack channel request and I'll get to it.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. And finally, the biggest piece of outstanding work is getting tests and continuous integration running end-to-end on everything. The most important part is from the Kubernetes perspective. That'll kind of give us the best signal of are things working, and then to make sure that each one of the individual components are also tested. Host path was already green. David's working on GCPD tests. Both Sergey and Felipe have picked up mock driver. And
What is that?
This is adding end-to-end tests for the mock driver in Kubernetes.
What's a mock driver in Kubernetes?
It's the mock driver that you guys wrote, except it's writing an end-to-end test that will exercise the code path using the mock driver.
Okay. Well, the mock driver doesn't, it may be quite difficult. That's why I didn't use it.
Okay.
Yeah, I use host path instead because the mock driver doesn't leave artifacts, and those artifacts are used to look at the system and determine that the calls actually were accepted and executed. For example, so when you make a call in a test, you have to find another method to see if the call worked, right? Mm-hmm. And with the mock driver, it was quite difficult. Now, if you're just testing your call to see if it succeeds, then yes, but that's why I use host path, because when you have an action, you can see the artifact, right? And the artifact is that the volume exists, the mount exists, and so many other things. So that's my suggestion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, basically there's no state being shared between different calls, and that's what you need for a real end-to-end test.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. So I guess it'll be up to Felipe and Sergey. If you guys agree, then we can scratch this off the list. We can decide that in a future meeting after you guys get a chance to look at it.
Yes.
But what Luis said sounds reasonable. End-to-end tests. So the last item here is enabling the host path tests to run in CI. So either Felipe, Sergey, or David will pick that up.
Should this just be one person so that
that would help. Between the three of you, who wants to do this? First one to volunteer.
I'll do it.
All right.
I'm not even on the list, but I could do it.
I could do it, but I don't know how to, so, maybe Luis will do it faster.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Luis. And I spelled your name right.
Yay!
So once the end-to-end tests are done, we want to make sure that there are end-to-end tests and unit tests for the external sidecar containers. We're going to be having folks use these things. It's important that they're tested. I know there's unit tests for most of these, but there are no end-to-end tests. And finally, there's no CI that is continuously building and testing these external components.
Can I suggest that end-to-end will be for this quarter? The end-to-end test may require a system setup with a little more complicated.
Yeah.
The unit test is something that we can definitely do right now.
Okay. Does anybody want to volunteer to pick up the unit test and CI for any of these components?
And also have a project, I don't know if you have it, that has a whole bunch of CI tests for the external provisioner. So we can give it to anybody that's not in the meeting and wants to participate.
I think this is the hardest thing to get folks to volunteer for. It's not very sexy work.
Yeah, but hey, it teaches you how to use the code.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we'll leave it unassigned for now, and then we'll keep poking people and see if anybody's interested. Next up is CSI Sanity. So David rightfully pointed out that the way that CSI Sanity is currently written, it's mixing up both unit tests and end-to-end tests. And he has suggested a cleanup that will separate unit tests from end-to-end tests. And once that's done, the idea is that the drivers can basically import these libraries and add unit and end-to-end tests very easily. David, are you currently working on this, or is Sergey working on this? You know,
we're about to discuss it actually as soon as this meeting ends.
Okay.
Yep.
So Luis, David, and Sergey are going to discuss it. Okay. Okay, then I will leave you alone, and you guys can go off and discuss that. That's pretty much all I have on the agenda today. All right, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, wait one second. Can we use this channel?
Yeah, feel free.
We can end the recording, but we can.
Yep, I'll terminate the recording, and then I'll drop off, and whoever wants to stay on, feel free.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Right.
If this meeting ends when I end it, just feel free to rejoin.
Okay, if not, I'll just send out a new link.
Okay.
All right.
I'm about to terminate now.
All right.